Grappler Baki. The show that makes even Dragon Ball Z characters look like cheerleaders. When you think about Baki, you think of muscles. Every main protagonist is jacked, as if the premier qualification to be an important actor in the plot was to look like a pro bodybuilder. This makes it premium motivation fuel for lifters, as I've described in a video that you can find in the description. But more importantly than that, it also offers a vast catalogue of physiques to pick from for anyone looking to set their sights on a goal body. The problem is that it can be tough to distinguish between what is achievable naturally and the rest. And since sorting out what is or isn't realistic in a piece of fiction can be a bit of a mindfuck, I decided on a Natty or not video. While I find the concept silly, I do believe that applying it to manga characters can be a fun exercise, on top of helping you set realistic expectations for what you can expect to look like in the future. Before I begin, I want to make clear that I will be basing my assessment on the way the characters look, not the stats that correspond to their physiques, as these often don't correspond or make no sense at all. Without further ado, let's get started. Let's start with the most complex piece of the puzzle, our boy Baki. This one's all over the place. In some arcs he looks natural, in some he doesn't. But regardless of the part of the story you look at, there's always something interesting to say about his physique. Keep in mind that I'm only covering Grappler Baki in this video, so his shape after the maximum tournament will not be discussed here. Which doesn't really matter since this is the point where it became decidedly unnatural. As the main character, his stats often match his body, a privilege that isn't awarded to the other members of the cast. Something that will become more and more apparent throughout this video. When we first meet him, Baki is 13, and he's already boasting an impressive physique. This is a little improbable, since prepubescent boys are at an obvious disadvantage when it comes to building muscle mass. So for someone who's 5'2", reaching 160 pounds while staying lean without producing much testosterone at all is already a red flag. However, the same body on someone a little bit older wouldn't look out of place. And I'd even go as far as to say that this physique is more than achievable for the vast majority of the population. Things start becoming blurrier after Baki's training to beat the Yasha ape, during which he gained 20 pounds without increasing his body fat percentage. This is of course completely unrealistic, and I highly encourage you to never gain that much weight that quickly, even if you're super skinny. This is the part of the story that could get Baki's Natty card revoked forever. Yasha Ape fight, he's juiced up. Anayama fight, he's half Natty. Gaia arc, he's advanced. Then it all goes south again and he doubles in size for his bout against Yujiro. At that point, he's 180 pounds, and interestingly, his physique would only look natural again after his return to 167 pounds. Where his body appears right on the cusp of being unattainable, getting more and more unrealistic with each tournament round, with the Retsu fight marking the moment where Baki's physique would stop being achievable without drugs, due to the impossible mix of size and leanness. Even though he gets dwarfed by some of the other monsters of the cast, Katsumi is still too good to be true. He's a genius with supreme genetics, and is considered to be especially gifted in the muscle building department, which is quite impressive in a series chock full of prodigious martial artists. It's not surprising then that he would possess one of the most massive and balanced physiques in the show, a stature that is not represented well by his stats, as he should be much heavier than 255 pounds. The closest thing we have to a dad bod in the entirety of Grappler Baki. Motobe really just looks like a dude who goes swimming twice a week and watches his carbs, which is already respectable considering he's 51. But of course appears a little pathetic when you compare him to the likes of Orochi Doppo. Nothing special to say here. Keep yourself in shape and you can easily have a similar body at the same age. Dr. Muscle, the man Afflinex copied his train like an athlete gimmick from. Not only is he a respected surgeon, he also apparently possesses magical powers, since he literally triples in size when he takes his shirt off. I remember reading his first apparition in the manga and thinking to myself, man, this character is for sure on steroids. But nope, an advanced knowledge in biomechanics and a gym membership is all that was needed for him to turn into a more anabolic version of He-Man. Once again, his stats make no sense at all. For him to appear that big at 6 feet, he'd need to be at least 340 pounds. And even though he's not super lean, he'd still give Broly a run for his money in terms of size. Considering his second apparition consists in him aggressively pinning himself with Tren in a public bathroom, you'd think that mentioning him here is a waste of time. But since I base my assessment on the way the characters look and nothing else, it's irrelevant. His physique is much more of a toss-up than you would expect, at least on paper. 255 pounds at 6 feet 3 is actually quite reasonable, and anyone that tall who wants to look big will eventually reach these waters after around a decade of training. Problem, they still wouldn't even come close to Jack's size. Conclusion, his stats are achievable, but not his physique, as expected from someone so deep in the steroids rabbit hole. Retsu is part of that wave of Baki characters which got introduced during the Maximum tournament and kickstarted the slow but visible power creep that led to everyone looking like Mr. Olympia. At no point during the story did his physique appear natural, something that even his stats correlate, as for once, they reflect his size. At 5 feet 9, 233 pounds, you'd look like an absolute tank. And that's exactly what Retsu is. Sorry Bruce Lee fans, but to get lats like that, it'll take more than just Chinese Kempo. Poor Kato. If you were a character in any other shonen manga series, your physique would be seen as respectable. But since you exist in one of the most anabolic stories of all time, your otherwise muscular frame is relegated to the rank of riffraff. It is worth noting that he's the only main character whose body actually resembles that of a martial artist, along with Kosho, who's also sitting at around 180 pounds. Don't get me wrong, these physiques would still be very impressive for anyone focusing entirely on fighting, but for bodybuilders, they constitute accessible standards to shoot for. Alright, let's be serious here for 1 second. Biscuit Oliva is the type of guy that makes even Yujiro Hanma look small. Body dysmorphia cases increase 80% every time he goes out in public. When Baki gets sleep paralysis, he sees Oliva standing in the corner of his room eating a whole rotisserie chicken with his bare hands. Jack Hanma does steroids, steroids do Oliva. He is what would happen if Ronnie Coleman could create a clone of himself, then fuse with it times infinity. So, no, you won't look like him, BBC genetics or not. A boxer. Baki characters are so buff that sometimes I forget that they're supposed to be martial artists. The same goes for him, considering he's got traps up to his ears and tree-trunk legs. Two features that you very rarely see in professional fighters, at least the ones that aren't supplementing their gains with shady Mexican supplements. For his stats of 200 pounds at 5 feet 11 to be realistic, he'd need to be carrying an astonishing amount of lean mass, considering he's one of the most ripped characters in this list. For some reason, I've always thought this guy was gigantic, but turns out he's just another 6 feet poser like myself. While his physique doesn't match the 200 pounds he's supposedly weighing, he has the body I would expect of an ex-military member in his prime who does bodybuilding on the side. His legs, especially his hamstrings, are really well developed, but maybe he just does a set of Romanian deadlifts to failure every time he loses to Yujiro. He's also far from being ripped, so I felt comfortable giving the captain his Natty card. Do we really have to do this? Do I really have to tell you that no, you won't be able to replicate the physique of that 366 pounds monster of a man? I mean, these are strongman stats, except that Anayama walks around with a bulging six-pack, striated quads, and shredded abs and shoulders. Forget about Natty or not, this isn't even achievable with drugs, and his physique is an actual anomaly of nature. Huh, this one's interesting. You see, on paper, he should be disqualified immediately, as a 56-year-old man rocking that type of body is a dead giveaway for TRT. But since the question is whether or not you could achieve a similar physique, and not if this physique makes sense for him to have naturally, then it's worth mulling over. Doppo's appearance is based on that of Masoyama, a famous karate master, and Itagaki did a good job at reproducing his structure, as they're spitting images of one another. Of course, he couldn't resist the temptation of slapping an extra 40 pounds of muscles on his frame in the process. And that's enough to push Orochi's physique outside of the realm of realistic body goals. Most famous for getting thrown out of a roller coaster by Dorian later on in the show, Suero was the first opponent that Baki fought in the manga, which immediately set the tone considering that he paved the way for a long list of giant muscle-bound men that would soon populate the pages of that glorious series. As impressive as they sound, his stats don't match his physique at all. At 6'8", he'd never look like that if he were to only weigh 280 pounds. Having that fall off a chest along with those gigantic arms would be a tall order for any man, let alone someone with long segments. Something tells me that if he were to be asked to pee in a cup before a karate tournament, they'd find more than just creatine. I decided to include Endo in this list because he's one of the only muscular characters in Baki who's not also super lean, and powerlifters need representation too. Even though he's presented as an ogre of sorts, his physique actually makes a lot of sense in the context of his goal, which is strength at any cost. The only area of his body that appears a little bit suspicious is his core, but besides that, any 6'6" man with a solid frame who's not afraid of packing body fat on will be able with time and efforts to turn into a similar mountain beast.
You serious?
Trolling aside, Yujiro's body is not achievable for mere mortals, which is sort of the entire point of his character to begin with. Don't let his stats fool you. Being 265 pounds at 6'2" is doable, but you'd never be able to do it while staying as lean as he is. The ogre basically sitting at 5% body fat year round. Even when he was 16, the amount of muscle he had on his frame already far surpassed what most grown men will be able to build in a lifetime. And he only got bigger and more shredded from that point on. The only moment when his physique is sort of within reason is during his meeting with Emi, and even then, it's still very far-fetched. Papa Hanma will remain an untouchable pinnacle of physical development for us to admire, but never reach. Manga Gaia is actually fairly skinny. Standing at 5'3" and weighing 130 pounds, he's a far cry from the other muscle-bound monsters of the series. His physique in the anime is more impressive, but still possible to reach for any natural. You basically just have to focus on abs and arms, plus do a few push-ups, sit-ups here and there, and you're good. The one thing that might stay out of reach is the freaky vascularity he gets in his neck/forearms when he triggers his adrenaline, but besides that, it's an easy goal to shoot for. You might be surprised to hear that about a man who weighs 330 pounds, but Toba has one of the most realistic physiques in Grappler Baki. For a man standing at 6'10", weighing 200 pounds just isn't gonna cut it. And you can see that despite being as heavy as two grown men, he still showcases skinny looking arms and a relatively mediocre back. This is because taller men, especially those who are freakishly long, need to put in much more effort in order to make muscles look bigger, compared to the average guy. The great news is that there's very little chance of you being as tall as Toba, but even if you were, know that this body is perfectly achievable for you, regardless of how thin you might be. You just have to train. It's an ape. I don't care how many return to monkey memes you've got saved on your computer. Going Harambe mode is simply not possible. Or recommended. Imagine having to shave all that hair. Kudos to you if you know who that is, as he's sadly been completely forgotten by most Baki fans, even though he is the man who one-shotted Anayama. He's 6'8", so 2 inches shorter than Toba, but 40 pounds heavier, while at the same time being visibly leaner. This is one of the biggest and most formidable physiques in all of Grappler Baki, and is of course completely out of reach for us normal humans. Only solution? Go lift at Chernobyl and hope that the radiations make you jacked. And there you have it. I hope it was fun, but also that it reoriented your standards towards more realistic expectations. At the end of the day, aiming for an impossible body goal isn't gonna kill you. And shooting for the moon is fine, as long as you realize that there's a strong chance you'll end up landing on a star instead. This is what makes Grappler Baki and other shows of his caliber so great. You can't help but want to surpass your limits when presented with such monstrous physiques. Nonetheless, it's always good to hear what you can expect to look like naturally on condition that you put in the work. If there's another manga you'd like me to do a Natty or Not video on, let me know. And I'll be seeing you soon for another Baki video.